Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of this podcast. First and foremost, I apologize for only one episode last week. That never happens. I don't think I've been doing this show for almost 3 years. At this point, that has never happened at all. So I apologize about that again. I've just been going through a lot of stuff these last couple of weeks. Just a lot of tough conversations about just a whole bunch of topics. But I can assure you, I am feeling a lot better right now than this time around last week. I can definitely say that. And while you're probably listening to this episode, it's going to be Tuesday, which means I will be en route to Aruba, my last official off-season vacation, celebrating my 2-year anniversary with the girl that I'm living with, my wonderful girlfriend. And I will have a couple other episodes that will drop at some point this week, probably Wednesday and Friday, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, 2 of those 3 days. But this one's going to drop on Tuesday. I'm recording at about 9:17 on Monday evening, and this will drop right after midnight. But for today's episode, we're going to get into some Brian Burke quotes today when he spoke to Dave Molinari. He's had some interesting nuggets in there. An update on Evan Rodrigues from a few days ago. I know it's maybe a little bit of old news, but I have not touched on it just because I've been so off the grid these last few days. And we're also going to get into a Ty Smith article that I read today from EP Ringside and how I think he has a chance to really surprise some people this year. So that's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. So let's get right back into it. Again, I apologize for only one episode last week. That's not going to happen again. When I don't usually have a lot of mental health problems, but just been going through a lot lately, and I know it's been tough, but I know better days are ahead. And, just doing this podcast really does take my mind off everything. And I love talking Penguins hockey for you all. So let's get right into it. So Brian Burke spoke to Dave Molinari of Pittsburgh Hockey Now. And, there were some interesting quotes in it, I should say. He was asked about the 9 defensemen and could they deal one? And he said, we don't have anything active with trade discussions right now. That said, other teams have asked about our defensemen when they've called, so it is a possibility. That is typical GM executive speak. He's not going to tip his hand. He's not going to obviously say which teams have called, but the fact that teams are calling, that is good news. I think for the Penguins to trade one of Dumoulin or Pettersson, they are going to have to want to be blown away by an offer. I think, especially with where the defense looks right now, when you have Dumoulin and Letang on the top pairing, probably Marcus Pettersson with Jeff Petrie on the second pairing, Jan Ruutta with, I would think, Ty Smith on the third pairing. I think the Penguins, obviously they're not trading Chris Letang. They're not going to trade Jeff Petrie. They just acquired him. They're not going to trade Jan Ruutta, not Ty Smith either. But for the other two on there, I know they've been out there in trade talks. And again, I would probably rather trade Dumoulin than Pettersson, even though I think it's a bit difficult to replace someone like Dumo. I think if they were going to be traded, they probably would have been by now. I still think you're looking at maybe a depth deed. Maybe does Chad Ruhwedel get dealt now that he's kind of expendable down there? Does someone like Mark Friedman get dealt? I mean, does POJ get dealt for maybe a bottom 6 forward or something like that? I really do think the Penguins, they're going to have to be blown away again for Pettersson or Dumo, but for like one of the other defensemen, if you can get maybe a draft pick, young forward in return, I think they would do that. So obviously, it sounds like there's nothing active. That said, that they're not going to stop other teams from calling them. So it sounds like that some teams are interested in a couple of their players, but I guess the Penguins just haven't gotten an offer that they've liked. And also, it's been pretty quiet, I would say, as of late. I do think it's going to start to get pretty busy these next couple of weeks. I mean, training camp is 2-3 weeks away at this point. There's a lot of good free agents out there still. So, teams still need to get cap compliant. Definitely stay. Honestly, I'll be in Aruba until, so you all are listening to this on Tuesday. I will be there until very late Sunday night. I am just assuming that all the crazy stuff is going to happen while I'm over there. And like, I'm just gonna be like, well, it's only my luck. So, it's going to heat up, I think, pretty soon, but it's still a little early enough in the dog days of summer. Burke also said, I don't know if we're going to do anything else between now and camp. It's unlikely, but our phones are still ringing this time of year. People are still calling around. Yeah, I mean, it's September 5th, Brian, as of right now. September 6th when you all are listening to this. Of course, teams are still calling around. There's 2 to 3 weeks to go into training camp. They're trying to finalize their rosters. Teams are trying to still dump salary, which, again, is something that I do think the Penguins want to do. Brian Burke, good executive. I think he's done a good job with the Penguins. This is also someone that, kind of hinted that Malkin was going to leave to the media when he didn't take their final offer. Literally less than 15 hours later, the Penguins signed you now. So, again, this is not Jim Rutherford over here who is just going to, have you on your lap and say, oh, what do you want for Christmas this year, sir? No, it's going to be typical GM speak. If this were Ron Hextall, I'm sure he would say the exact same thing. But the quote that really got me interested was this: I think we're a better team going into next year. Now we're just waiting for camp to start. The better team part. Are you though? I mean, is the defense better? Yes. I think people that say that the defense is not as good, I think they're kind of lying to themselves. I think that they're overrating Mike Matheson, and I think he's a good player. But Jeff Petrie is better than him, and it's not even close. Look at the data. Just watch them both play. Ty Smith has the potential to be a really solid player. I'm going to get to him later on in this episode. The defense is improved. You got bigger, got tougher, better in front of the net, good players offensively, good players defensively. I think that's a strong unit. Goaltending, there's definitely a case to be made that the Penguins did not do enough there. This is now the 3rd season of Jari DeSmith. I know what the definition of insanity is. I'm sure you all know it as well if you go on Google all the time. But it's a choice that Ron Hextall made, and he's going to have to live with it. So, I would have liked to see them get maybe a better backup, but so you saw some of the other goalies with what they got. I just don't think the Penguins are going to be able to do that. Forward-wise, the top 6, very good. Bottom 6, though, I don't think it's better than where it was last year. You can roll Evan Rodrigues on your third line right now. Your 12th forward is someone like Ryan Poehling, Josh Archibald, Drake Caggiula, Drew O'Connor, Radim Zohorna. I don't know. It's just I don't think they're as deep. It's nice that they brought Danton Heinen back. Jeff Carter is still kicking a little bit. I hope he doesn't really fall off this season. Kasperi Kapanen, again, you have really no idea what the heck you're going to get from him. And then I think Teddy Blueger needs to bounce back. I think Brock McGinn needs to be more consistent this season. Had a good first half, got banged up in the second half, was not nearly as good down the stretch, had a brutal 7 games for the Penguins in the playoffs. So I don't think right now they're truly a better team. I think they're kind of where they were last year. Top 3 team in the Metro. I think a sure playoff team, but are they really much more than that? It's hard to say. I mean, would you say that they're a Stanley Cup contender? In my opinion, I don't think so. I think when you look at the East, who I think are above them, Tampa Bay, Carolina, maybe the Rangers, but again, I'm not super crazy about the Rangers offseason moves. I think, they lost a lot of goal scoring. They've signed Vince Trocheck and didn't really do anything else, to be honest with you. Toronto, but it's Toronto here. Boston's in the Atlantic. I don't think the Metropolitan Division, though, is that good this year. And I said that on one of the Twitter spaces last week, I believe. It was with a lot of the Penguins reporters. I was very nice. Hockey DB was very nice to invite me on with Josh Yohe, Jesse Marshall, Josh Getzoff, Shelly Anderson, and all those other people. It was just really great to be on there. And I think the Penguins at least were the third best team in their division. I mean, I think at most they're top 2, but I think they're kind of where they were last year. Did they upgrade in at least one area? Yeah, I think they did. Did they downgrade in another area? Yeah. Did it kind of stay the same in another area? Sure. So, it's still a bit, I mean, I wouldn't say it's early. I know it's late in the off season, but when you look at the off season as a whole, I think they're just kind of where they were last year. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. This is still a good team, a playoff team, a team that should have went at least into the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs this past year, a team that honestly could have, gotten to the Eastern Conference final. They showed how Carolina was looking, especially against Boston. Then they didn't look that good against the Rangers. I think they're a team that, they can do some damage, but this is also a team that could potentially lose in the first round again. I know that's not what people want to hear. I get it. It's a results-oriented business. I know people are going to, ask for heads to roll and all that stuff. But, I think overall, when it comes to Burke's statement, I don't know if they're better. I also don't think they're worse, if you ask me. So that wraps up this first segment for today's episode. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to get into the story from Greg Wyshynski and his update on Evan Rodrigues. And it looks like the Penguins are still involved with him, which is really good news. But before we get to that, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite cookie dough chunk. Puffs have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, plus it is healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. You can run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It will be the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. Like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and they're tasty. Chocolate-covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. They are so good. You can go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15, and get 15% off your order for one. That's promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your order at Built.com. All right. Welcome back to another episode. Welcome back to this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Yes, it has been a week, and that's embarrassing that I just messed that up, but we're going to roll with it. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter, LO_Penguins. And again, of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen. I know I have to put it down everyone's brain, but I hope you all, it's your first listen. So getting to Greg's story here. So he said, this was his story about September 1st of last week, which players are left and where are they going. And he talked about Evan Rodrigues. He said he remains one of the buzziest players without a contract. Fans wonder why he hasn't signed yet, while also fantasy casting the versatile center on their team's roster. His agent apparently told ESPN that there are a good 7 or 8 teams he's having discussions with about Rodrigues, and he hopes to have something done soon. Well, it's been about almost a week now. Darren Ferris's agent said there are 2 to 3 teams that we feel is a good fit with, but there are cap restraints. There are guys trying to move money to make room for it. And apparently he said one of those teams is the Penguins, who are capped out, of course, with Malkin, Letang, and Rust. And then they brought on Jeff Petrie. He also said the Calgary Flames has shown interest in Rodrigues, and they may be in that conversation as well. So the fact that the Penguins are still involved in Rodrigues is a really good sign to me. This is a player that, it's kind of insane that he is still in the free agent market just 2 to 3 weeks before training camps open up. This is a player that in a normal world where there's no flat cap, he's probably getting 2.5 to 3 million per year or something like that. I think he might sign for less than that, to be honest. But the fact that the Penguins are still involved shows to me that they are trying to move salary. Again, I know Brian Burke's like, well, we're probably not going to do anything. Again, that's GM speak, people. They say that all the time. They're not going to tip their hand with what they're discussing and all that. I'm sure Hextall, he's been having conversations with teams every day. The fact of the matter is, Jens, is that it's a flat cap and teams do not want to take on money still. Maybe that's going to change over these next couple of weeks because training camps are coming up and teams might be more willing. But right now, they're being difficult. That's the nature of the offseason at this point. But, if the Penguins were to bring Rodrigues back, I would welcome it. I think he would be, a really good fit still. In this team's forward group. And yeah, I know it would look really similar, basically, if not identical to the forward group that they ran back last year. Maybe Ryan Poehling is the 13th forward at that point, Drew O'Connor, something like that. But again, is it really that big of a deal that they run back, a forward group that was really good at 5v5 last year? The Penguins, when Crosby and Malkin are on the ice the last couple of years, this is a forward group that's outscored the opposition. Normally when those kind of players are off the ice, a team like the Penguins or a team like the Blackhawks back in the day or the Oilers, they would get outscored. but not the Penguins. They've had good depth over these last few years, and it's been able to stay afloat, and they've been able to score more goals than allow opposing goals, and create more chances than allow chances at the opposite end of the rink. And he's a player that can play wing, can play center, can play up and down your lineup. Had a breakout year for the Penguins last year, and again, if you can get him in for on decent value, I think that's a really easy decision. At least for me, that settles your forward group at that point. Again, Gensel, Crosby, Rust, Zucker, Malkin, Raquel can probably do Heinen, Carter, Rodrigues, and then Bluger, McGinn, and Kapanen and something like that, with Ryan Poehling in waiting. And say a player struggles, you can bring Poehling in, and I know right now he's probably your 12th forward, but I think when you have an opportunity to make your team not only deeper but better, I think you do it, and you ask all the harder questions later. That's what some training camp battles are for. Some of these players that are on the market, they may have to take PTOs to come to camp. We'll actually have to see if the Penguins offer any PTOs to players. Remember last year, excuse me, it was around this time, close to it, that they offered Brian Boyle a PTO, and he came in, had a really strong training camp, had a good preseason, and signed a 1-year deal. I'm not really sure if he's going to play again in the NHL. I'd not assume it's going to be with the Penguins if he does play again, but turn that PTO into a contract and excuse me, score double-digit goals for the Penguins, something he hasn't done in the last few years. So you never really know with stuff like that. I'd be curious to see if they would give anyone a PTO, but it is good to see that the Penguins, they're involved in these negotiations. They're still trying to make their team better. And, up until opening night, which is, I believe it is October 13th, if I go to the Penguins app here and double check. No, I do not want the preseason schedule. That's for sure. I will say this, the preseason at this point, 3 weeks away, against first preseason game on the 25th of September. And yes, October 13th. So a little over a month now until the regular season. The Penguins, they're going to keep doing their due diligence. They got plenty of time to do something. But again, if they were to bring back Rodrigues, it would be a beautiful move. I think, at least for me. That wraps up the second segment of today's episode. Coming up in the final segment, we're going to get into some Ty Smith talk and why, I think he has the chance to really surprise some people this year. I know I talked about it in my trade analysis about a month and a half ago, I think, at this point. But again, I really do think he has the opportunity to surprise a lot of people this year. So that's all coming up right after this commercial break. All right, we're back in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. You're going to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter, LO Arsenal Penguins. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. Always necessary when you are recording an episode. So EP Ringside by EliteProspects.com. They had a free article open today. This is from Mitch Brown. He's the contributor, director of North American Scouting. Great article. If it's still open, you can go there and just look up film room. Ty Smith has a chance to turn into a top 4 defenseman with the Penguins. And I know, you look at his results last year, 6th percentile for wins above replacement, 4th percentile for even strength offense, 5th percentile for power play, 41st percentile for even strength offense. It was bad. He was not good. But, as, Mitch writes, his below average controlled exit percentage, had a high number of dump outs to controlled exits. If you look at, his entry prevention percentage for rush defense, it highlights an inability to stop rushes. So he was just getting burned in the defensive zone every shift. And then the gap between Smith's shot assists and that weighted variance suggests lots of passes leading to shots, but few leading to scoring chances. So he just wasn't doing enough, with, generating and defending. And, you look at Corey Schneider's all 3 zones tracking, and, for zone entries, 72nd percentile for entry rate, which is good. Pass entries, 90th percentile, which is good. But entry success, 11th percentile. Like, that is not good. Entry defense, denial rate, only 17% of the time did he have a denial rate. Carry prevention, 13th percentile. Entry transfer prevention, 28th percentile. Retrieval exit rate, 13th percentile. Just absolute putrid numbers. And as Mitch writes, he struggled to make plays off retrievals. He became too quick, skilled, and intelligent for those issues to linger. And, you saw that in his rookie season when, he was playing well in the defensive zone. He was contributing on the rush, pinching down low, getting into the dangerous areas of the ice. But, last year he became turnover prone. He was lacking at the in tight edges area to, as Mitch writes, change direction under heavy pressure. When he gets separation, he's so, he's closed in on advancing the puck that he passes to cover the teammates, or he just bombs the pucks up the boards, which, I like to call kind of a heave and pray play, to be honest. You're putting the puck along the boards and hoping that someone doesn't smack it down with their hand or something like that. But, I do think what the Penguins are going to do with someone like Smith, this is going to be Todd Reirden's school of development, and they're going to sit him down, show him some film, be like, okay, you have to be better in this area, and this area, and this is how you do it. And Reirden, we all know how good of a defensive coach he is in the NHL. It worked with Mike Matheson, it worked with Cody Ceci, and I think it has a really good chance to work with someone like Smith. And that's what Mitch says. Development is going to really help him achieve his ultimate upside. And, even though he had underlying issues last year with, natural growth and, development and stuff and, zone entries and zone exits, he still thinks that he could become the player, that he was once touted, which is a top 4 defenseman with power play ability. I do think if he starts having a good year this year, he is going to get some power play minutes. And, and he could potentially be on that unit with someone like Jeff Petrie, who is more than capable of quarterbacking a power play. He quarterbacked the one in Montreal for numerous years. But I definitely think that Smith, he was not a fit in New Jersey under Lindy Ruff's system. That kind of system is just, it's not for him. It's, Lindy, he runs a defensive first system. He does not, it's not good for offensive players. And I think he really suffered because of that. But now you're going to Mike Sullivan's system, which is very up-tempo, very fast-paced, speed and skill. I really think this can be just majorly beneficial to him, and where you can see what he shows off with his skating ability, his passing ability, the shot that he has, everything that he is good at in the offensive zone, I think is going to come out this year. And I really do think that he can surprise a good amount of people, to say the least. And hopefully he'll be able to clean up his defensive issues, because remember, they got Mike Matheson for Patrick Hornquist, and what was the thing on him? Oh yeah, good offensively, great in transition, a tire fire in his own end. Well, you know what? Give credit to Todd Reirden, because he unlocked more of his offensive ability, because Matheson just had the best season of his career. He continued to be strong in transition, and he just posted some of the best defensive metrics that he's had throughout his career. Is that going to stay the same in Montreal? Who knows? But the fact that, Reirden was able to unlock that with him shows that his coaching works. And I really do think that he is going to work magic with Smith here. He is going to surprise a lot of the fan base. And it may not be long before he's potentially in the top 4 at some point this year. I think it's be wise if you play him with Jan Ruta to start, a veteran who can, support him. And I wouldn't say baby him, but, someone who, has been known to play with offensive defense. I mean, this is a player that played the last couple of years with Victor Hedman on the top pairing. And, if that goes well, I wouldn't be surprised to see him be elevated up to the second pairing to play with Jeff Petrie. It's kind of the same thing. Petrie's an older veteran, someone who can play with any kind of defenseman, I think. And while, Petrie's not what he once was, he's still good both offensively and defensively, where, he can kind of, I wouldn't say baby him, but I guess, just, watch and maybe cover him at times if he does make a mistake, just because he is good defensively. I think that would honestly be a solid pairing as well. So, that's really it. I think I have on Ty Smith. I really do think he's going to be a different player this year. I wasn't big on the trade at the time, but, you look at his hockey prospecting data, and you look at, all 3 zones data by Corey Schneider and, Jay Fresh Hockey and stuff. And, this was a legitimately good player just a couple seasons ago. I know he had a bad year in New Jersey, but who's to say he can't rediscover his form? Matheson did it. Why can't Ty Smith? And he's still really young. He's a lot younger than Matheson. I'll say that. But again, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'll have another one coming out Wednesday or Thursday. I know I'll be in Aruba, but the content never, ever sleeps. I'll probably be on one of my laptops. I'll bring my work and my personal laptop, so I'll be able to post through that. Again, thank you all so much for listening. Again, I very much apologize for being off the grid for the last couple of weeks. Just so much stuff has been going on with my mental health, and I've had a lot of anxiety for really the first time in my life. So I've been dealing with that, but I think I'm finally, coming out of it. I've seen the better days so far, and I'm really excited to, go on this vacation here and, go out of the country for a little bit before. When I come back, it'll be just a couple of weeks officially, or a little less than a couple of weeks before camp starts. So I'm getting really excited about that. Again, thank you all so much for listening, and I will talk to you through all a bit later this week.